I'm absolutely delighted to welcome everybody to the Management School. My name is Claire Leach and I'm the Executive Dean of the Management School, and my area of research is actually leadership and entrepreneurship at that intersection. This, as I was saying to a few folks just a couple of minutes ago, I think has to be one of my favourite events in the annual sort of schedule of events. We started our inaugural series in 2024, and it is an opportunity for young professors to showcase their research, their life's work to date, but also I think to share their journey for junior colleagues to see what sort of challenges they overcame to become professors, and then what sort of I suppose serendipitous opportunities presented themselves, etc., etc. So it's always a really interesting experience at two levels. You get to hear about a different piece of research from maybe one that you're used to, as well as hearing somebody's individual story. So today I have the great pleasure in welcoming Alex Skandalis, who's professor in marketing and consumer culture. So Alex has been a professor for, gosh, a couple of years. Yeah, I think we're working our way through. But he is a truly interdisciplinary scholar, working at, I think, the intersection of consumer culture and sociology. And that actually is reflected in the range of journals in which his work has been published. So he's got papers in sociology, but also in marketing journals and also journal business ethics. So a real diversity, which I think shows both the breadth and the quality and the depth of his work, which is absolutely fantastic. And his work has been supported by research funding, which obviously is something that we're all very keen. So both UKRI and work funding from the British Academy. So today he's going to talk to us, and his work is really about those creative encounters. He's looking at work in sort of hospitality, and that's potentially that sector. And there's obviously, I think, which is really interesting, this emphasis on digital flows, which clearly is such a topical issue at the moment. So without further ado, I'm going to let Alex talk for about 30 minutes. And then we're going to have a question and answer session, which will be handled by Maria Piacentini, who is our AD for research and is a professor in the same department as Alex. And for those of you who are here in the room, I think Sonia is going to be running around with a microphone, but we also have the opportunity for those of you online to post your questions. So hoping that hybrid works without any problems. So the floor is yours, Alex. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Claire. So good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here today, and I'd like to start by thanking Claire and Maria for giving me the opportunity to share some things about how I got to this point and provide a summary of my academic research. I'd also like to thank Sonia for coordinating the inaugural lecture series. And the topic of today's lecture reflects my own academic research on consumer culture over the years. I wanted to make this session as accessible as possible, so I'm not going to go into much depth in terms of theory, but rather I'll try and tell a story based on my own academic journey. Hopefully you'll find it interesting. So as a brief introduction, I just wanted to start by saying a few things about how I ended up in academia. And my background has actually nothing to do with marketing and consumer culture or anything related to the social sciences, really. I did my first university degree was in engineering, in production and management engineering in Greece. I then made the decision to come to the UK to pursue a master's degree in marketing in Alliance Manchester Business School. Then spent a few years working in the industry, in management consultancy and engineering, before coming back to Manchester again to do my PhD in marketing and consumer culture and a 4-year scholarship in Manchester Business School again. So I was initially introduced to this field of consumer culture and the broader field of marketing during my undergraduate degree, essentially through a product design module, and more specifically, emotional design. So at the time, I was kind of intrigued by the central claims of this book here by Don Norman on emotional design, who was kind of trying to move away from this purely functionalist view of design and towards a perception of design that revolves around affect, meaning, and experience. And I was particularly interested in the fact that emotional responses to design are not purely psychological, but also socially and culturally mediated. So that kind of led me to conduct my undergraduate thesis on emotional design and get further into this field of consumer culture. And during my master's degree, I was introduced further to this field. I've got a book here on consumer tribes, which I think in 2008 was my initial reading at that point on consumer culture, looking at marketplace cultures and communities, consumption myths, ideologies, and so on and so forth. And that kind of helped me to that's when I've kind of realized that I was fascinated with those more anthropological and sociocultural approaches to consumption. And I suppose that's when I decided I wanted to undertake a PhD in consumer culture. And this was further crystallized in 2011, 1 year before starting my PhD, when I submitted the paper and presented it in my first ever international conference, bringing together elements from my undergraduate thesis and consumer culture theories, if you like. So after completing my PhD in Manchester, my first academic post was in France, in Toulouse Business School. And I joined Lancaster 1 year later as a lecturer in marketing in March, I think, 2017. And I was then promoted to senior lecturer in 2021, and more recently to professor in marketing and consumer culture. So over the years, I held different roles in the department, and my teaching practice has been, I would say, heavily informed by my own academic research as well, largely adopting a research-informed approach to teaching across different modules that I taught over the years, such as online consumer engagement, brand strategy, social media, and consumer behavior, amongst others. So throughout this journey, I had the pleasure to work with some wonderful colleagues in the department, in the faculty, other institutions as well. I'd like to particularly, and some of them are here, and I'd like to particularly thank my former PhD supervisors and longtime collaborators and co-authors for all their help and support, Emma Bannister and John Byram. I'd like to particularly thank Maria Piacentini as well for all her help and support since I joined Lancaster. And of course, I'd also like to thank my partner, my parents, my sister, and my friends for all their support throughout this year. So after this brief introduction, the rest of today's presentation will focus on outlining my academic research to date with different colleagues and co-authors from Lancaster University and other institutions. So my work has been always interdisciplinary and pretty much focused on exploring the role of consumer culture in society and its impact upon individuals, organizations, and other stakeholders, often bringing together theories from other disciplines like sociology, cultural studies, psychoanalysis, and human geography. And in fact, much of my work pretty much moves across three different themes: creative encounters, digital flows, and material traces. And I'm going to try today to discuss different lines of research across these three themes. And also much of my work has focused on music practices and experiences. And this has been largely informed by a lifelong interest and passion in music, which started early in my childhood. So this first theme on creative encounters pretty much revolves around the work that I've done on music, on aesthetics and taste formation in musical spaces. So over the course of the last 14 years, and since I initially started my PhD and until today, I've done interpretive and qualitative research in the context of different musical spaces and different fields, from classical music to indie music, employing different methods, from visual methods to in-depth interviewing, participant observation, and ethnographic fieldwork. And I've been particularly interested in independent or indie music's production and consumption, which simply put refers to music that is created outside major labels and emphasizes creative freedom and do-it-yourself ethics. So early work here focused on spatial taste formation processes in different contexts. I've been always fascinated by the work of French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu, who essentially talks about how our tastes and preferences are formed through the employment of different forms of capital, like economic, cultural, and social capital, and how that leads to different levels of internal disposition. And within sociology, cultural studies, and consumer culture research as well, a lot of work has relied upon Bourdieu's writings to consider how different modes of sociocultural distinction are manifested, sustained, and reproduced in social space. However, these do not always account for the lived experiences of individuals and the structures within which these experiences are embedded. So that was kind of like the starting point of my initial work here. So inspired by humanistic geography and the work of philosopher of place, Edward Casey, what I was trying to do here is to see how our preferences, our choices, and our tastes are not just individual or social class-based, but are also shaped by the physical places in which consumption happens. And the idea here was to link aesthetic experiences in different environments with identity, memory, and social positioning. So initial research conducted here has been published in different journals, such as Marketing Theory and the Journal of Marketing Management. For instance, one study looked at classical music tastes and how these are shaped by the spatial meanings of concert halls. Things like historical associations, oral architecture, how the concert space is experienced, and the role of different orchestras that act as local taste communities, essentially. More recent work here explored further this move toward place-specific understandings of musical taste by focusing on the spatiality of different music fields, focusing on extraordinary experiences in the context of music festivals and how these are positioned within the structures of the music industry and everyday life, and on the role of consumption activities in gaining professional legitimation within the music industry. So, for instance, one previous study here looked at how individuals who are passionate for independent music, they make the transition from fans to professionals by moving in between the authentic and commercial discourses of the independent music field to orchestrate their professional journey. So the aim here was actually to investigate how membership in a field initially as a fan can turn into a source of skills, competence, and community for becoming a professional within the same field by mobilizing a number of material and non-material resources. So again, much of this recent work, and especially on place-specific understandings of music fields, also revolved around the case of Manchesters in the music field. And I've always been fascinated and have a personal interest and passion with the musical history of Manchester and the Northwest in general. And for academic research purposes, cities with strong musical heritage like Manchester are very ideal research contexts to explore the interrelationships between place and music consumption, because Manchester, for instance, has been associated historically with a lot of different styles and genres and within the broader realm of independent music. So Manchester's musical heritage spans from the 60s onwards. It has been associated with different scenes, different bands, record stores, and so on and so forth. It has also been credited with the early independent music boom of the 70s, and of course afterwards with the launch of Factory Records, the associated Hacienda nightclub. This further helped to establish the city as a significant place within the music industry and the alternative and independent music field. So in this paper here published in Sociology with my co-authors, Emma Bannister and John Byram, I focused on live music venues and experiences in Manchester to introduce this concept of place-dependent capital, building upon earlier work. And this theory was developed as a tool that captures both structural and experiential dimensions of musical taste by looking at how individuals accumulate place-specific capital through their situated live music experiences. And this theorization kind of goes beyond the contextual value of localized variations of capital that we can find in subcultures, for instance, or music scenes, and highlights how regional competitiveness is strongly associated and mediated by historically situated live music experiences and venue ecologies, as in the case of cities with strong heritage in terms of music as Manchester. Other related work within that creative encounters theme took a slightly different orientation, moving away from sociology and music scenes and towards music festivals, cultural tourism destinations. So in this context, and if we look at existing academic research, that still perceives music festivals primarily as liminal spaces where attendees are liberated from the conventions and restrictions of everyday life, and the resulting festival experience is seen as extraordinary, as something that is positive, emotionally charged, hedonic, and memorable. So the research I conducted here across several years in music festivals pretty much challenges this dominant escapism paradigm in tourism and consumer research, which puts forth this more idealistic understanding of extraordinary experiences. So much of my research here focused on festivals that are positioned within urban life and within the conventions of everyday life and the structures of the indie music industry, like the case of Primavera Sound Festival that you can see in the pictures here in Barcelona, Spain, where I've done ethnographic fieldwork for a number of years. So a recent paper on this topic, published a few years ago in the Journal of Travel Research, actually explored this more everyday nature of tourism destinations and the relationships between authenticity and extraordinary experiences. So this study looked into how authenticity is achieved when music festivals are not necessarily positioned only as offering an escape from everyday life, and how they can take the form of more staged events, if you like, where attendees do not necessarily seek some sort of form of existential authenticity, but rather they engage with the dominant institutions and everyday life. So what we found here was a different type of extraordinary experience, which is positioned within everyday frames and unfolds through a spatial authentication process that revolves around the festival's strong music character, the more kind of urban and quotidian configuration of the festival site, and the instrumental orientation of the festival experience. So as opposed to standard theorizations of festivals as those liminal and escapist spaces, authenticity is achieved here while engaging with these more mundane features and embracing tourism experiences that are dictated by everyday life and social structures. So overall, this first theme of my research here on creative encounters, primarily exemplified through music practices and experiences, has also led to different engagement activities over the years. Things like opinion pieces in outlets like The Conversation and the Sociological Review for the significance of grassroots music venues in the music industry, media coverage from local and national outlets and radio interviews on the future of music festivals, some industry practitioner conference presentations on the role of music festivals in shaping the independent music industry, and consultations with some key players in the industry like DICE, the ticketing company, for instance, on the impact of COVID-19 back in the day into the live music industry. More recently, together with my co-authors, I've submitted written evidence to the UK Parliament's inquiry on the competition and market functioning in the live music industry in the UK, looking, essentially highlighting the importance of safeguarding small and mid-sized venues and the protection of regional cultural diversity and local cultural infrastructure when it comes to live music in the UK. So the second theme of my academic research pretty much which has also largely informed my teaching practice throughout the years, is digital flows and digital cultures. And this line of work investigates how digital technologies and virtual spaces reshape consumer experiences, identity work, and value creation, and interrogates the boundaries between and across the physical and the digital in contemporary consumer culture. So different themes here, and over the years I've looked at different questions and explored different aspects like how online communities navigate boundaries between reality and fantasy, escape and everyday life, how emerging technologies like augmented reality can lead to more superficial escape routes, and also how digitalization at the same time constrains and facilitates the creation of authentic human experiences. So a key aspect of my research here essentially focused on online brand communities in the context of digital gaming as well, with academic papers published in different journals over the last 10 years, with a more recent piece published in the Journal of Business Research. And this work has been heavily inspired by the psychoanalytic theories and writings of the British psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott, who talks about these transitional objects and transitional phenomena. So for Winnicott, transitional objects are those material or symbolic entities that inhabit a potential space between inner psychic life and external reality, which is neither fully external nor fully internal. So in the context of my work, Winnicott's theory helped illustrate how online consumption communities and online brand communities exist somewhere in between the physical and the digital, and often at the intersection of reality and fantasy, where participants negotiate between the real and the imagined, and how this leads to this concept of transitional consumption experiences that we've introduced back in the day, that sit somewhere in between shared reality and individual fantasy. And how this situation also can lead to new forms of value co-creation that occur via the complex interplay of real and fantasy-oriented resources. So, for instance, I've previously conducted research in the context of online football manager gaming communities, which exemplify this reality-fantasy tension outlined in the previous slide. And in those online communities, members actually engage in serious unpaid voluntary work, researching players, developing strategies, collecting real-life data about companies, about football teams, and so on and so forth. And then they feed these back to those companies that publish and create these games. So value co-creation here occurs within this potential or transitional space where community members navigate tensions between shared reality and individual fantasy. And this kind of demonstrates how contemporary online brand communities often make real and imaginary distinctions increasingly irrelevant. And more today, we can see that happening in other fields and in other contexts, like in social media platforms, in streaming services, emergent industries as well, such as esports, which I'm going to talk a little bit more in a while, that reflect this interplay between the physical and the digital, and this consumption of both real and fantastic time and space. So building on this research, more recent work with my co-author Chloe Priest, published in the European Journal of Marketing, also critically examines whether digital technologies truly enable escape or only create superficial escape paths. So in the context of these new technologies and drawing upon cases, writings on imagination and memory and remembering, we looked at how augmented reality enables consumer time work to describe how people use such technologies to imagine an escape, to create psychological distance from present realities. And our analysis here essentially revealed that escaping through a technology like augmented reality can be an illusion, because AR has this emotional offloading capacity which offers short-lived and immersive entertainment. And we've seen that in the past in the case of popular examples, for instance, like Pokemon Go. But this is essentially a case of superficial escape from everyday life. So while a technology like augmented reality supports imagination and memory, it also puts limits on them. In many cases, digitalization provides this illusion of freedom. Within the same digital flows theme, other work here with my co-author, Mo Chedet, during COVID, looked at the transformation of socialization processes due to the digitalization of entertainment and community formation in the pandemic, and whether digital interaction can replicate or replace touch, contact, and co-presence. So in the context of queer digital entertainment spaces, our aim here was to develop a digital textual sociological understanding of alternative modes of touch and contact. We considered the alternative possibilities of intimacy by imagining different modes of haptic encounters, and this research has been previously published in journals such as Gender, Work and Organization. And finally, as part of this research on digital flows and this theme here, over the last years, I've had the pleasure to supervise with Haley Colker and James Cronin, two of our former PhD students, Charlotte John and Queen Hoang, who have been conducting their doctoral research in esports and digital detoxing, respectively. So with Charlotte, and Charlotte looked the competitive plane of video games, esports, which these days I think is a huge billion-dollar industry. And Charlotte, we looked at the legitimation of this market from a spatial perspective. So here, this research explored the role of both online and offline spaces in conferring, creating, and constraining legitimacy on the esports market, and has been presented in a number of practitioner and academic conferences. At the same time, with Queen focused on digital detoxing, and we've looked here at people's efforts to abstain from technology. Digital detoxing is quite popular practice these days, where people try to stop using electronic devices, social media for a certain period of time because of the overwhelming presence of the digital in our daily lives. So this research has been published in journals like the European Journal of Marketing and Marketing Theory, exploring how people experience desire, how they resist consumption, how they use other market-located objects like dumb phones, for instance, to critique technology for them, and how eventually they return back to the digital even more supercharged to consume more digital technologies, essentially highlighting that practices like digital detoxes only serve as a temporary escape from the digital. And all in all, this theme of research has also led to some activities outside academia, things like media pieces commenting on the dystopian nature of emerging technologies like AR and VR during and after the pandemic in particular. Media coverage and engagement with local communities, for example, through Lancaster's Festival of Social Science, especially from the work that we've done with more on digital touch and contact and the increasing digitalization of many of our physical experiences in a post-COVID-19 era. And the final theme, I think, of my research here relates to the material traces of consumer culture. And this has been mainly associated with different funded projects and successful research funding bids. The first one is a British Academy project, which pretty much I've acted as a principal investigator and relates to the production and consumption of craft objects in specific places. And the second one was funded by the UKRI. I acted as a co-investigator in this project and focuses on plastic packaging, sustainability, and recycling. So I'll start with, I'll start with the one on craft. And on the one hand, this funded research on craft essentially revolves around the place-specific nature of both craft production and consumption, despite the dramatic rise of online marketplaces, and highlights the significance of place-specific narratives and perceptions of different stakeholders. So the focus here was on local craft spaces, such as Manchester's Craft and Design Centre, a centre that is located in the Northern Quarter in Manchester in the Fish Market building, and is supported by Arts Council England and the Manchester City Council. So such spaces typically provide a home for local independent designers and makers to sell textiles, ceramics, glass, amongst others, jewelry and other accessories. And they often run a series of craft-related exhibitions as well and workshops, while at the same time acting as a retail space where those makers can showcase and sell their work. So this work here essentially highlights that places such as Manchester's Craft and Design Centre serve as meaningful entities for different stakeholders to perform their passion for craft, and at the same time they're set apart from standardized spaces of mass production and consumption because they're also often grounded within localized narratives of cultural heritage. So I have looked here at the lived experiences of both craft makers and visitors who drew extensively upon their relationship with craft, their shared values in terms of craft production and consumption. And the idea here was to explore how such spaces can be promoted in a way that takes into consideration those perceptions and those lived experiences and those needs of different stakeholders, based on that, developing this concept of experiential identity of place, which is discussed in this more recent Journal of Place Management and Development paper. Ongoing work here also focuses on the politics of belonging to commercial settings and different emotional attachments to craft spaces, and also how those attachments are often in tension, leading to different understandings of moral ownership to place from different stakeholders. And on the other hand, our UKRI research on sustainable consumption and recycling focused on how plastic food packaging is embedded into people's everyday lives. And I had the pleasure here to work for a number of years with Maria Piacentini and Alison Stowell as lead PIs for this project, and also with James Cronin, Linda Hendry, and John Hardy. And the starting point here for this research was the primacy of the so-called attitude behavior gap and people's reluctancy, inability, or lack of commitment to translate their desire to act in a sustainable manner into action. And if we look at previous academic research, there's a growing number of studies that have actually critiqued the usefulness of this attitude behavior gap theorization because of its focus on assigning responsibility to individual decision making and missing a broader consideration of the broader social, material, political, and environmental conditions that influence consumer behavior. So this UKRI research here focused on developing this more holistic account of people's willingness to engage in sustainable consumption and maintain sustainable behavior, moving away from this more micro level focus on individual decision making, which ignores the bigger picture that shapes people's lifestyle practices and preferences and recycling practices as well. So in this work package of the plastic packaging in people's project that I was co-leading with James and with the help and support of our research associate, Charlotte Hadley, we looked at household practices and household interactions with plastic packaging and how these are located within a specific socio-historic and cultural context. We collected data from 27 households across 2 different university counties in the UK. And we looked specifically at meal times, shopping practices, how they use and they dispose plastic packaging in different aspects of their daily lives. And our research suggests that essentially plastic packaging acts like a passenger. It stays there in the background, accompanies people in their journeys when it comes to food, but at the same time leading to significant consequences like pollution and toxicity. So in broad terms, our findings here highlighted that there's more than just a gap between attitudes towards plastic and people's recycling behaviors. And there's also a number of significant barriers around the household that have to do with responsibilities, with shared household duties and effort, cultural factors, and interpretation issues, for instance, as well, in terms of what counts to be recyclable that affect people's practices. Yeah, so this theme of research also has led to considerable impact and engagement activities, particularly from the Plastic Packaging in People's Lives project. I've only included a couple of examples here, things like white papers, reports, opinion pieces in the media, a little book on plastics in everyday life that we've published a few years ago, even a plastic in music playlist that you can see on the slide here, and you can use the QR code to listen to it if you want to, which is on Mixcloud, I think. And yeah, I think that kind of brings me to the last slide, which to conclude, I would also like to very briefly discuss my ongoing and future research plans across these three themes that I've presented today. So in terms of creative encounters, I'm currently working on a number of projects on live music practices and experiences. One of them is looking at affective atmospheres and the architectural qualities of musical spaces, looking in a more specifically at spaces with cultural heritage and live music venues build form, and how lived architectural space actually shapes live music experiences. Another ongoing project extends this research on craft and focuses on the politics of belonging to commercial art settings, and how that leads to different senses of moral ownership over place. In terms of digital flows, I've just a couple of months ago, I'm in the process of starting a new project here that combines my research on digital flows with the creative encounters theme. So I'm currently writing a conceptual paper on music streaming practices and the impact of responsible AI on the future of analog and live music ecosystems, with the potential to submit a bid on this topic to the Arts and Humanities Research Councils in the near future. And finally, in terms of material traces, we have ongoing work here with the Plastic Packaging in People's Lives project, a number of different papers that we're working on, focusing amongst others on sustainable consumption and practices and social structures. My kind of plan here in the future is to combine my work on escapist experiences with sustainability, and look at how experiences that are located outside the context of everyday life might change recycling practices, like, for instance, when people go on holidays or on festivals. And I think that's more or less all. Thank you so much for listening, and I'd be happy to answer to any questions that you might have.